Oh my goodness. Are you all right? Sir, can you hear me?
What do you do when money can't buy your life? 15 doctors, 0 answers. Alessandro De Luca, one of Italy's most feared mafia bosses, was dying, and no one knew why. Then at 3 a.m., a janitor pushed open his door. She shouldn't have been there. She definitely shouldn't have solved a medical mystery that baffled Europe's best specialists. But that cold October night, she did exactly that. Before we begin, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible stories like this every day. The De Luca compound sat on the hills overlooking Florence, a fortress disguised as a villa. Ancient cypress trees lined the private road leading to the estate, their dark silhouettes standing guard like silent sentinels. Behind the villa's Renaissance facade lay a world of marble corridors, priceless art, and secrets that had been kept for generations. In the past 2 months, 15 doctors had passed through its iron gates. Specialists from Milan, Paris, London, even the Mayo Clinic. Cardiologists who'd saved prime ministers. Neurologists who'd written textbooks. Oncologists whose research had won international acclaim. Men and women who charged obscene amounts of money just to walk through the door, who flew first class and stayed in 5-star hotels while they puzzled over test results. And Alessandro De Luca, the most feared man in Tuscany, was still dying. Carla Wilson had been cleaning the De Luca compound for exactly 4 months when everything changed. She'd taken the job because options were limited for a Black American woman in Florence with a nursing degree that nobody recognized. Her Italian was broken, pieced together from phrase books and awkward conversations with shopkeepers. Her visa situation was complicated, a tourist visa that had expired 3 months ago, keeping her in a constant state of anxiety. And cleaning paid cash, no questions asked, no papers required. She worked the night shift, which suited her fine. Less people, less questions. Less chance of being noticed, less chance of someone asking for documents she didn't have. The other staff whispered about Il Capo, the boss. The housekeepers spoke in hushed tones during shift changes. The guards exchanged worried glances when they thought no one was watching. How Alessandro had collapsed during a meeting with the Sicilian families 2 months ago, falling right out of his chair in the middle of negotiations. How he couldn't eat without pain. How even the smell of food made him nauseous. How his hands shook when he tried to hold a gun, something that had never happened before. How the doctors kept running tests, drawing blood, taking scans, and finding absolutely nothing. "It's stress," said Dr. Lombardi, the family physician, after the 10th round of blood work came back clean. "Running an organization like this, the pressure, the constant vigilance, the body can only take so much." "Perhaps psychosomatic," agreed the psychiatrist from Vienna, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who spoke in careful, measured tones. "The mind can manifest physical symptoms when under extreme duress. I recommend therapy, perhaps a retreat to somewhere peaceful." "A rare autoimmune disorder," suggested the specialist from Switzerland. A woman with silver hair and an impressive list of credentials. She prescribed treatments that did nothing, medications that sat untouched on Alessandro's nightstand because they made him feel worse, not better. Alessandro's sister Lucia had stopped crying weeks ago. Now she just sat by his bedside, watching her brother fade, her face a beautiful mask of grief. She was younger than Alessandro by 3 years, with the same dark hair and sharp features, but where his eyes had always been hard and calculating, hers were soft, filled with a sadness that seemed to age her overnight. She held his hand for hours, reading to him in Italian when he was too weak to focus, talking to him about childhood memories when the silence became too heavy. Carla had seen him only once up close. About 3 weeks ago, she'd been mopping the marble hallway outside his room, the sound of water sloshing in her bucket echoing off the high ceilings when he'd stumbled out in the middle of the night looking for water. Even sick, he was striking. Tall, easily over 6 feet, broad-shouldered, the kind of presence that commanded respect even in weakness. But illness had carved him hollow. His olive skin had turned gray, almost ashen. His dark eyes were sunken, surrounded by shadows that spoke of sleepless nights and constant pain. His hands trembled as he reached for the glass she quickly poured from a pitcher on the hallway table. "Grazie," he'd whispered, his voice rough like gravel. Then his guard had appeared, a mountain of a man named Bruno who'd been with the family for 20 years. Scolding Carla in rapid Italian for being near the family's private quarters, his voice harsh but his eyes apologetic. He'd ushered Alessandro back to bed with surprising gentleness, treating his boss like fragile glass. That was 3 weeks ago. Carla hadn't seen Alessandro since, but she'd watched the parade of doctors come and go, each one looking more frustrated than the last. Now, on a quiet Thursday night at 3 a.m., Carla pushed her cleaning cart through the villa's silent corridors. The wheels squeaked softly on the polished marble floors. She'd finished the main halls, the grand entrance with its crystal chandelier, the dining room that could seat 30, the sitting rooms where important men discussed important things. Now she was heading toward the East Wing, where the family's private quarters were located, to clean the hallways and sitting rooms there. She'd just turned the corner when she heard it. Retching. Violent, painful retching that echoed through the silent hallway. Carla paused outside Alessandro's door, her hand on her cleaning cart. Should she get someone? Call the guard? Ring for the nurse? But the retching continued, followed by a weak groan that made her chest tighten with a familiar ache. She'd heard sounds like that before, during her nursing rotations, from patients who were suffering, who needed help. Carla opened the door carefully. The bedroom was dimly lit by a single lamp. Alessandro was on his bathroom floor, hunched over the toilet, his body shaking with spasms. He was wearing only pajama pants, his bare back showing the prominent outline of his ribs and spine. The nurse who was supposed to be watching him, a middle-aged woman named Rosa, was asleep in the corner chair, her head tilted back against the cushion, snoring softly. An open magazine lay in her lap. Carla moved quickly, abandoning her cart in the hallway. She knelt beside Alessandro, pulling his dark hair back from his face as he vomited again. There was almost nothing left in his stomach, just bile and suffering, the acidic smell filling the small bathroom. "Va bene," she murmured, switching to her broken Italian. "I've got you. Just breathe. Respira." When the spasms finally stopped, Alessandro slumped against the wall, breathing hard. Sweat beaded on his forehead and upper lip. His skin was cold and clammy to the touch. He looked at her, confusion flickering across his face. "Who?" he started, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm Carla. I clean here. At night." She grabbed a towel from the rack, dampening it with cool water from the sink. "I'm going to get your doctor." "No." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength for someone so weak. "No more doctors. They can't." His voice broke, and she saw tears of frustration gather in his eyes. "They can't help me." Carla saw it then, in his dark eyes that had probably intimidated hundreds of men, not just pain, not just exhaustion, resignation. He'd given up. He believed he was going to die, and he'd accepted it. "Please," he whispered, and the words sounded like it cost him something. "Just stay. For a minute. I don't want to be alone." So Carla stayed. She helped him back to bed, supporting his weight as he leaned heavily on her. She brought him water in a clean glass, holding it steady as his shaking hands tried to grip it. She wiped his face with the cool cloth, gentle around his temples and the back of his neck. The nurse, Rosa, continued sleeping in the chair, her soft snores the only other sound in the room beyond Alessandro's labored breathing. "Why are you here?" Alessandro asked after a while, his voice barely audible. "At this hour? Most people don't work at 3 in the morning." "I work nights," Carla said, rinsing the cloth in the bathroom sink. "Quieter. Less people around." "American?" He'd caught her accent, even in those few Italian words. "Yes. From Atlanta." "Why Italy?" He shifted in the bed, trying to find a comfortable position. "Why Florence?" "Long story." "Not very interesting." He smiled weakly, and even sick, she could see the ghost of what his smile must have been like when he was healthy, disarming, probably dangerous. "I have time. I'm not going anywhere. The doctors have made that very clear." So Carla told him about nursing school at Emory University, about graduating with honors and plans to work in emergency medicine, about coming to Florence for a 3-month summer program and falling completely in love with the city, the art, the architecture, the way the light hit the Duomo at sunset, about her Italian boyfriend, Giovanni, who'd promised to help with her visa, who'd said they'd get married and she could stay forever, about how he'd disappeared with her savings, not a lot, but everything she had, 2 weeks after her visa expired, about the nursing credentials that didn't transfer, the complicated process of getting certified in Italy, the language barriers, about the expired documents that kept her in a constant state of fear, jumping every time she saw police, about the under-the-table jobs that barely paid rent on her tiny studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood. "You're a nurse?" Something shifted in Alessandro's expression. His eyes sharpened, focusing on her with sudden intensity. "Was. In America. Here, I'm just qualified enough to push a mop and scrub toilets." He was quiet for a moment, studying her face in the dim lamplight. "The doctors," he said slowly. "They've tested everything. Blood work. I've lost count of how many times they've drawn blood. Tissue samples from everywhere. Bone marrow biopsies that hurt like hell. Every scan imaginable, MRIs, CT scans, PET scans, things I can't even pronounce. They've looked for cancer, for viruses, for genetic disorders, for tropical diseases I've never been exposed to. They found nothing, absolutely nothing." "But you're still dying." "Yes." He said it matter-of-factly, like he was commenting on the weather. "They won't admit it. My sister won't admit it. But I see it in their eyes. The doctors, I mean. They have no idea what's killing me. And whatever it is, it's winning." Carla bit her lip. This wasn't her place. She was just the janitor, the woman who cleaned floors and emptied trash cans. She had no business getting involved in a mafia boss's medical crisis. She should call the nurse, wake her up, let the professionals handle this. But she heard herself ask, "Tell me your symptoms. All of them." From the very beginning. "Why?" Alessandro's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're a cleaner." "Because 15 doctors with expensive degrees and fancy equipment have examined you and found nothing. Maybe you need someone who's willing to look differently, someone who's willing to see what they're not seeing." Alessandro studied her for a long moment. Then he started talking. About the tremors that started 3 months ago, subtle at first, just his fingers shaking when he tried to write. About how they'd gotten progressively worse until he couldn't hold a gun steady, couldn't sign his name without it looking like a child's scrawl. About the nausea that came in waves, unpredictable and violent, making it impossible to eat anything substantial. About the metallic taste in his mouth that never went away, no matter how much he brushed his teeth or rinsed with mouthwash. About the muscle weakness that had turned simple tasks like climbing stairs into exhausting ordeals. About the confusion and memory lapses, forgetting names of people he'd known for years, losing track of conversations mid-sentence. About the way his body was betraying him, slowly, systematically, taking away everything that had made him powerful. "I used to run 5 kilometers every morning," he said, his voice thick with frustration. "Now I can barely walk to the bathroom without feeling like I'm going to collapse." As he talked, something stirred in Carla's memory. A lecture from her toxicology rotation during her 2nd year of nursing school. Professor Martinez, a tiny woman with a huge presence, pacing at the front of the classroom. A case study about a politician in South America with similar symptoms, the diagnosis that had taken months to figure out. "Your doctors tested for heavy metal poisoning?" Carla asked, her mind starting to race. "Yes, multiple times. Mercury, lead, arsenic, cadmium. Nothing. All within normal ranges." "What about organic toxins? Plant-based compounds?" "They said my blood was clean. No alkaloids, no glycosides, nothing unusual." "But did they test your hair, your nails, your tissue samples for bioaccumulation over time?" Alessandro stared at her, and she saw confusion, then something like hope flicker across his face. I don't know. They never mentioned it." Carla's mind was racing now, pulling up information from textbooks she'd studied years ago. "These symptoms, they didn't start all at once, did they? They built up." "Gradually, one thing after another." "Yes, over about 3 months. First the tremors, then the nausea started a few weeks later, then everything else, getting worse and worse. 3 months. Long enough for a slow-acting poison to accumulate in fatty tissue and organs, short enough that standard toxicology screens might miss it if they weren't looking for the right compounds, if they weren't testing the right biological materials. "What changed 3 months ago?" Carla asked, leaning forward. "New medication? New supplements? Changes in your routine? New places you started going? New foods?" Alessandro thought about it, his brow furrowing with concentration. "Nothing. My life was the same. Work, home, meetings, the same schedule I've kept for years. I don't even eat out much. Everything is prepared by our family chef, Signora Benedetti. She's been with us for 20 years. Has the chef changed anything? New recipes? New suppliers?" "No. Same recipes my mother taught her. Same suppliers we've used for years. We're very particular about our food sources. In my line of work, you don't take chances with unknown providers." Carla chewed her lip, thinking. "What about drinks? Coffee, wine, liquor, things you consume regularly?" "I drink espresso. 3 or 4 cups a day, same as always. And every evening I have brandy." His voice softened, became quieter. "My father's brandy. He died 2 years ago. Heart attack. Left behind a collection of rare cognacs and brandies he'd spent 40 years assembling. I've been working through them, 1 bottle at a time. It's my way of remembering him. Of feeling close to him. Every evening? every evening for the past 4 months. Since I moved into his study, took over his desk. I sit in his chair, drink from his crystal glasses, and I feel like he's still here somehow. And the symptoms started 3 months ago. Yes. Something clicked in Carla's mind, like a lock tumbling open. Can I see it? The brandy? The bottle you're drinking from now. Alessandro gestured weakly toward the door to his study. Through there, on the desk. The bottle's about half empty now. Carla stood and walked into the adjoining room. It was elegant, masculine. Rich leather furniture and dark wood paneling, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound books. On the massive mahogany desk sat a crystal decanter and a distinctive bottle of cognac, ornate label in French, about half empty. A single crystal glass sat beside it, residue of amber liquid in the bottom. She picked up the bottle carefully, holding it up to the desk lamp. The liquid was clear, amber, beautiful, expensive, probably. But when she swirled it gently, she noticed something. A faint residue at the bottom of the bottle. Almost imperceptible. Just a slight cloudiness that shouldn't be there in properly aged brandy. Carla brought it back to the bedroom, her heart pounding. Mr. De Luca, she said quietly, I need you to stop drinking this. Right now. Not another drop. Why? His eyes widened slightly. Because I think someone's been poisoning you. Slowly. Methodically. With something dissolved in your father's brandy. The color drained from his face, what little color there was. That's impossible. Who would... The bottles are in my private study. No one has access except... Who has access to your study? Carla pressed. Just me. And my sister. She comes in sometimes. And Marco, my cousin. He's been helping with family business while I've been sick, going through paperwork, handling meetings I can't attend. Alessandro's jaw tightened. No, it can't be. Not Marco. We grew up together. I could be wrong, Carla said, though her instincts said otherwise. But everything fits. A lipophilic toxin, something that dissolves in alcohol and accumulates in fatty tissue over time. It would explain why standard blood tests missed it, why your symptoms have been progressive, why you're dying and no one knows why. Blood tests show what's circulating in your system right now. Not what's been building up in your tissues for months. What kind of poison? His voice was hard now. The voice of a man who'd built an empire and wasn't used to being made a victim. I won't know until I test it properly. Do you have any chemistry equipment? Anything I could use for analysis? Alessandro's jaw tightened, muscles working under his skin. My father's laboratory, in the basement. He was a businessman, but chemistry was his hobby. His passion, actually. He had a full lab installed down there. Professional-grade equipment. He'd spend hours down there, experimenting, testing things. It's probably dusty now, but everything should still be there. Can you show me? Despite his weakness, Alessandro insisted on coming with her. If someone's poisoning me in my own home, I want to know who. And I want to see the proof with my own eyes. They moved through the dark villa, Carla supporting some of Alessandro's weight as they went, past sleeping guards who didn't notice them in the shadows. Down the grand marble staircase, Alessandro's hand gripping the banister tightly, through a door hidden behind a bookcase in the library, down stone stairs that went deep underground. The laboratory was exactly as Alessandro had described. Professional grade, the kind of setup you'd find at a university. Benches lined with equipment, some of it covered in dust sheets. Microscopes, centrifuges, spectrometers, gas chromatography equipment. Shelves of chemicals in neat rows, labeled in precise handwriting. A wall of reference books and journals. Your father was serious about his hobby, Carla said, looking around with a mixture of awe and excitement.
He said it kept him sane,
Alessandro replied, easing himself into a chair.
Said that in our world, you need something pure, something that follows rules. Chemistry was his escape.
For the next 4 hours, Carla worked. She hadn't run chemical analyses in years, not since her undergraduate chemistry labs, but muscle memory took over. Her hands remembered how to prepare samples, how to calibrate equipment. She prepared multiple samples from the brandy, ran them through different tests, cross-referenced results with the textbooks she found on the shelves. Alessandro watched her work, his eyes tracking her every movement, asking occasional questions in a voice that grew hoarser as the hours passed. At 7 a.m., as morning light began filtering through the high basement windows, Carla had her answer. Thallium, she said, showing Alessandro her notes, the test results spread across the laboratory bench.
It's a heavy metal, tasteless, odorless, colorless, dissolves beautifully in alcohol, causes exactly your symptoms, tremors, nausea, that metallic taste in your mouth, muscle weakness, confusion. And it's almost undetectable unless you're specifically looking for it in the right tissues. Blood tests can miss it entirely if the exposure is chronic and low dose.
Thallium. Alessandro's voice was ice, cold and sharp.
That's rat poison.
It was. Banned in most countries now for that exact use. But it's still available if you know where to look. Chemical supply companies, industrial applications, someone with connections could get it.
How much is in the brandy?
Carla did the calculation based on her concentration measurements.
Enough to kill you in about 6 months of nightly drinking, maybe less depending on your metabolism. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. The dose is calibrated perfectly to look like natural illness. It's brilliant, in a horrifying way. And it's working.
Alessandro's hands clenched into fists, though they still trembled. For the first time since she'd met him, Carla saw the man everyone feared. Cold fury radiated from him like heat.
Who has access to my father's study? Who's been in the house since you started drinking from that collection?
They looked at each other, and Carla saw the moment understanding hit him, saw the pain in his eyes as he put the pieces together.
Marco, he breathed. My cousin. My father's nephew. He's been here constantly. Helping with business, he said. Making sure everything runs smoothly while I'm sick. He's been pushing to take over more responsibilities. Suggested to my sister that maybe I should step down, focus on recovering. Said the stress of leadership was probably making me worse. And if you die?
Alessandro's laugh was bitter.
He inherits my share of the family business. Our grandfather's will splits everything between the male heirs of the De Luca line. Right now, that's me and Marco. If I die, he becomes head of the family, controls everything.
There it was. Motive, clear and simple. Power and money, the oldest reasons in the world. We need proof, Carla said. Real proof. More than just my analysis. We need to catch him in the act. How? Carla thought for a moment, her mind working through possibilities. You keep drinking the brandy, but it's clean brandy that I prepare. I'll match the color, the consistency, everything. You start getting better, slowly, so it doesn't look suspicious. Whoever poisoned you will panic when you don't die on schedule. They'll either try to accelerate the poisoning or they'll make a mistake. They'll do something that exposes them. That's dangerous.
You're dying anyway, Carla said bluntly. At least this way you have a chance, and we have a chance to catch whoever's doing this. Alessandro studied her face. This American janitor who'd walked into his life at 3 a.m. and given him the first real hope he'd had in months. Why are you helping me? He asked. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. I'm not a good man, Carla. The things I've done, the things I do. Right now, you're just a man who deserves to know the truth, Carla interrupted. Right now, you're a patient who's dying from poisoning, and I'm a nurse who can't stand watching someone die when I can stop it. It's not about who you are or what you've done. It's about what's right. He nodded slowly. Okay, we do this your way. But if it gets dangerous, if you're at risk, you walk away. Promise me. We'll see. Carla. We'll see, she repeated firmly. For the next week, Carla became Alessandro's secret ally and silent guardian. Every night, she arrived at the villa at midnight and went straight to the basement laboratory. There, she prepared clean brandy, buying good quality cognac from a shop in the city, carefully matching the color and character of the poisoned bottle. She smuggled it into Alessandro's study in a matching bottle she'd found in the villa's extensive wine cellar. She hid the poisoned brandy in the laboratory, each night taking a small sample, documenting the poison concentration, building an evidence file that grew thicker with each test. And slowly, carefully, Alessandro began to improve. By day 3, the tremors in his hands lessened noticeably. By day 5, he could eat a full meal without nausea. By day 7, the color had returned to his face, and he could walk the length of the corridor without feeling like his legs would give out. The household was buzzing with excitement. The staff whispered about miracles. The doctors were baffled and pleased, running new tests, trying to figure out what had changed. Dr. Lombardi suggested that perhaps the body had finally overcome whatever was attacking it. The specialist from Switzerland cautiously mentioned spontaneous remission. The psychiatrist from Vienna suggested that perhaps removing stress had allowed natural healing. Lucia cried with joy, spending hours at her brother's bedside, watching him eat soup, watching him read documents, watching him be alive. But someone else was watching too, watching very carefully, and growing increasingly worried. Marco came to visit every day, bringing paperwork, discussing business, his handsome face arranged in expressions of concern. But Carla noticed the way his eyes narrowed when Alessandro stood up without assistance, the way his jaw tightened when Alessandro laughed at something Lucia said, the way he asked, too casually, if Alessandro was still enjoying their father's brandy collection. Every night, Alessandro told him, playing his part perfectly. It's become my ritual. I think maybe it's what's helping me recover. Papa always said his cognac had healing properties. Marco smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. On day 8, Carla entered the laboratory at 2 a.m. to prepare that night's clean brandy and run another round of tests on the poison samples, and found she wasn't alone. Marco stood at the laboratory bench, the original poisoned brandy bottle in front of him. In his hand was a syringe, and he was carefully drawing liquid from a small vial into it. The vial's label was in German, chemical formulas printed on the side. They stared at each other across the dimly lit laboratory. You? Carla breathed, her heart hammering in her chest. Marco smiled. It was the coldest thing Carla had ever seen, a smile that belonged on a predator. The American janitor. I wondered who was interfering, who was helping Alessandro. It's you. I'm calling the police. Carla's hand moved toward her pocket, toward her phone. With what evidence? Your word against mine? A black immigrant working illegally.
He shook his head slowly, taking a step toward her.
No one will believe you. The family will never believe that I would hurt Alessandro. We're blood. We're brothers in everything but name.
He stepped closer, and Carla saw what was in the syringe. Not thallium this time. Something darker, more concentrated. The vial beside it had a skull and crossbones symbol.
This would kill him in hours,
Marco said conversationally, as if discussing the weather.
Not months. Hours. I was saving it for emergencies, for if the thallium wasn't working fast enough. I suppose this qualifies as an emergency.
You won't get away with this. Carla's voice was steadier than she felt.
I already have. Even if you scream right now, even if you tell everyone, I'll be gone before dawn. I have passports, money, connections, and without this...
He gestured to the brandy bottle on the bench.
You have no proof. Just theories. Just the word of an illegal immigrant against a respected member of the De Luca family.
He was right. Carla had run all her tests on samples she'd taken. Without the original bottle, without catching him in the act, she had nothing that would stand up in court. Nothing that would convince the family. Unless...
You're right,
Carla said slowly, forcing herself to stay calm, reaching into her pocket.
No one would believe me. That's why I've been recording this entire conversation.
She held up her phone. Screen facing him. Red recording dot clearly visible on the screen.
Everything,
Carla said. Your confession. The syringe. Your emergency poison. Your plan to flee. All of it. Every word. The color drained from Marco's face. For a moment, they were frozen in tableau. Carla by the laboratory door, phone held up like a shield. Marco by the bench, syringe in hand. Evidence of his crime all around him. Then Marco lunged. But Carla was faster. She'd grown up with 2 older brothers in Atlanta. Brothers who'd taught her how to fight, how to defend herself in a neighborhood where being soft could get you hurt. She'd learned to be quick, to be smart, to use size against itself. She ducked under his grab, the syringe passing inches from her face. She kicked him hard in the knee, hearing something crack, and when he stumbled forward with a cry of pain, she brought the brandy bottle down on the back of his head. Not hard enough to kill him, just hard enough to drop him. The bottle didn't break, but Marco went down, hitting the floor with a heavy thud. The syringe skittered across the floor, and Carla kicked it away, under the laboratory bench where he couldn't reach it. "Help!" she screamed, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "Someone help!" Within seconds, the villa erupted into chaos. Guards flooded down the stairs, weapons drawn. Lights blazed on throughout the house. Lucia appeared in her silk robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. And Alessandro himself, stronger now than he'd been in months, descended the stairs with controlled fury burning in his eyes. Bruno the guard was beside him, hand on his gun. "Play it," Alessandro said to Carla, his voice deadly quiet. "Play the recording." So Carla did. The laboratory fell silent as Marco's voice echoed from the phone speaker. His confession, his explanation of the thallium poisoning, his admission that he'd been doing it for months, his casual discussion of the emergency poison, his statement about inheriting everything, his plan to flee. Every word was captured in crystal clarity. When it finished, when the recording ended with the sound of the struggle, Alessandro looked down at his cousin. Marco was sitting up now, held firmly by 2 guards, blood running from a cut on his scalp, his face pale with shock and pain. "You tried to kill me," Alessandro said softly. You poisoned my father's brandy, the last gift he left me, the thing I treasured most.
Alessandro, I can explain,
Marco started.
You put rat poison in the bottles,
Alessandro continued, his voice getting colder, harder.
You watched me get sicker every day. You watched Lucia cry. You watched the doctors fail. And you smiled and brought me paperwork and asked about the family business. The family needed stronger leadership. You're not family,
Alessandro said, and the finality in his voice made everyone in the room flinch.
Not anymore. Blood doesn't mean anything when you betray it like this.
He turned to Bruno.
Call the Carabinieri, and then call the family. All of them. Every head of every allied family. I want everyone to know what Marco De Luca tried to do.
Alessandro, please. Marco was begging now, tears running down his face. Don't do this. I made a mistake. I was desperate. Please. We're family.
You made your choice.
Alessandro's voice was ice.
And now you'll live with the consequences. You'll explain to the Carabinieri. You'll explain in court. And then,
his voice dropped to a whisper,
you'll explain to the families. They have their own justice for traitors, for men who poison their own blood. You know what they do to people like you.
Marco went even paler. In their world, there were fates worse than prison. As the guards dragged Marco toward the stairs, he struggled, crying, begging, but no one helped him. No one even looked at him. Alessandro turned to Carla. She was shaking now, the adrenaline fading, leaving her weak and trembling. There was blood on her hands from where she'd grabbed the bottle. Her shirt was torn from the struggle.
You saved my life,
Alessandro said simply.
I just noticed what the doctors didn't. No.
He stepped closer, and his hand reached out, gently steadying her when she swayed slightly.
You saw me. Not my power. Not my reputation. Not what I am. Just me. Just a man who needed help. And you decided I was worth saving.
He paused, and something shifted in his expression. Something soft and warm, and entirely unexpected. Something that made Carla's breath catch, despite everything that had just happened.
Thank you,
he whispered.
Thank you, Carla Wilson.
If you're loving this story, smash that subscribe button for more incredible tales every week. The prosecution of Marco De Luca made headlines across Italy and throughout Europe. Attempted murder, conspiracy, betrayal of the worst kind. The trial lasted 3 months, and every day brought new revelations about his plans, his motives, his cold calculation. He was sentenced to 25 years in an Italian maximum security prison. But everyone knew that wasn't the real punishment. The real punishment would come from the families he'd shamed, the alliances he'd broken, the ancient codes he'd violated. But the real story, the one that captivated everyone, was the American janitor who'd outsmarted 15 doctors and saved a Mafia boss's life. Carla became an overnight sensation. News outlets called her a hero. The American embassy contacted her about her visa situation, suddenly eager to help. Medical journals published articles about the case, about the importance of thinking outside traditional diagnostic frameworks. Nursing schools used her story in their toxicology courses. She received job offers from hospitals across Italy, but Carla just wanted her life back.
Too late for that,
Alessandro said, walking into his study where she'd been hiding from reporters for 3 days. He was fully recovered now, moving with the confidence and power that made him il capo. The gray pallor was gone from his skin. The tremors had stopped completely. He looked like a man who'd been given a second life. "I didn't ask for this," Carla said from her position by the window where she'd been watching news vans camp outside the gates. "I know, but you have it anyway." He sat across from her in one of the leather chairs. "So the question is, what do you want to do with it?" "I want to finish my nursing degree, get licensed in Italy properly, through the official channels. I want to help people. I want to do the work I trained for." "Then do it." "With what money?" Carla laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm still an illegal worker living in a room the size of a closet. I can barely afford food most weeks, and now with all this attention, I can't even clean houses anymore. Everyone knows my face." Alessandro smiled, and it was the first real smile she'd seen from him, warm, genuine, with a hint of mischief. "About that." He slid a folder across the desk toward her. Carla opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were documents. Lots of documents. Official-looking documents with seals and signatures. "Full scholarship to the University of Florence nursing program," Alessandro explained, watching her face as she read. "Complete 4-year program. With a stipend for living expenses, generous enough that you won't have to work while studying, guaranteed position at our family's private hospital when you graduate. We own 3 hospitals in Tuscany, by the way. Legal work visa sponsored by De Luca Enterprises, completely legitimate and above board. I've already spoken with immigration lawyers. And..." He paused, his dark eyes intense on hers. "If you want to pursue medical school afterward, specialized training, anything you want to study, I'll fund that too." Carla stared at the papers, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. "I can't accept this." "Why not?" "It's too much. I just did what was right. What any decent person would do." "No." Alessandro's voice was firm, brooking no argument. "You did what 15 of Europe's best doctors couldn't do. You solved a puzzle no one else saw. You saved my life when everyone else had given up. That's not luck. That's not coincidence. That's brilliance. That's dedication. That's compassion. And all of those things deserve investment." "I don't want charity," Carla said, her voice stronger now. "I don't want to be some pet project, some feel-good story about the poor immigrant girl who got rescued." "It's not charity," Alessandro said quietly. "It's payment for services rendered. You saved my life. This," he gestured at the folder, "doesn't even begin to repay that debt. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's a start." Carla looked at him, really looked at him, at this man who'd been dying 2 months ago and was now healthy because she'd asked the right questions at 3 a.m. Who was offering her everything she'd lost and more? Who was giving her back her dreams? "One condition," she said, her jaw set stubbornly. "Name it." "I work for it. Every penny. I'm not taking handouts. I'll work in your hospital during my training. I'll do research. I'll volunteer. I'll earn this scholarship, this position, everything. It won't be a gift. It'll be something I've worked for." Alessandro laughed, and it was a sound of pure delight. "You're as stubborn as I thought you'd be. Stubborn and proud and unwilling to bend. I respect that. Deal." He extended his hand across the desk. Carla shook it, his grip warm and firm. "One more thing," Alessandro said, his expression turning more serious. "My sister wants to meet you properly. She's been asking every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, She says she won't rest until she's thanked you herself. She can be very persistent when she wants something." That meeting changed everything. It happened the next morning, Lucia swept into the sitting room where Carla was having coffee, and before Carla could even stand up properly, Lucia had her arms around her.
"Thank you,"
Lucia whispered, her voice breaking.
"Thank you for saving my brother. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for seeing what no one else saw."
She pulled back, and Carla saw tears streaming down her beautiful face.
"You gave him back to me,"
Lucia continued.
"I was watching him die. Every day, watching him fade away, and there was nothing I could do. Nothing. I felt so helpless, so useless. And then you came. You, who had no reason to help us, who owed us nothing. You saved him! I'm just glad I could help," Carla said, her own eyes stinging.
"No," Lucia said firmly. "You're family now. You saved my brother's life. That makes you familia. You'll move out of whatever terrible place you're living in. You'll stay here in the guest house on the estate. It's empty, it's beautiful, and it's yours for as long as you need it. You'll eat with us. You'll be part of this family. This is not negotiable."
"Lucia, I can't."
"You can, and you will." Lucia's voice took on a tone that reminded Carla very much of Alessandro, steel wrapped in silk. "My brother owes you his life. We all do. The least we can do is give you a home while you rebuild yours. Please, let us do this. Let us help you the way you helped us." So Carla moved into the guest house. It was more like a small villa, really. 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, a sitting room with views of the Tuscan hills, a garden with olive trees and roses. It was the most beautiful place she'd ever lived. She started her classes at the University of Florence 2 weeks later. The scholarship covered everything: tuition, books, fees. The stipend was enough to live comfortably, to buy proper clothes, to not worry about every euro. She began working part-time at the De Luca family's flagship hospital, shadowing doctors, assisting in the emergency department, slowly rebuilding her clinical skills. And slowly, carefully, she and Alessandro became something more than victim and savior. They became friends first. It happened naturally, almost without them noticing. He'd find her studying in the villa's library late at night, buried in textbooks about pharmacology and pathophysiology. He'd bring her espresso, perfectly made the way she liked it, and sit with her, asking questions about what she was learning, genuinely interested in the science of medicine.
"You light up when you talk about pathology,"
he observed one night, watching her explain the cascade of effects in liver failure. "Your whole face changes. You become more animated, more alive. You light up when you talk about wine imports and trade routes," Carla countered, remembering a dinner conversation about the family's legitimate business interests. "And when you discuss art history, and when you talk about restoring old buildings, we're both nerds, just different kinds." "The best kind of people," Alessandro said with a smile. The friendship deepened with each passing week. Dinners together became routine, sometimes just the 2 of them, sometimes with Lucia, always filled with conversation that ranged from serious to silly. Long walks through Florence, Alessandro showing her hidden corners of the city that tourists never saw. Quiet evenings on the villa's terrace, watching the sun set over the Tuscan hills, talking about everything and nothing. They talked about their childhoods, hers in Atlanta, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs, growing up tough and smart and determined. His in Florence, raised to take over an empire, learning about power and responsibility and the weight of family legacy before he was old enough to understand what it meant. They talked about their dreams, hers to become a trauma nurse, to be the person who saved lives in critical moments, His to legitimize the family business completely, to move away from the old ways, to build something clean and legal for the next generation. They talked about their fears, hers that she'd never be good enough, that she'd always be seen as the girl who got lucky. His that he'd become his grandfather, hard and cold and isolated, powerful, but alone. A shared understanding grew between them, built on the foundation of those dark hours when she'd saved his life. They'd both faced death. Him literally, her through the constant fear and uncertainty of living illegally in a foreign country. They'd both been given second chances, and neither of them wanted to waste it. "I almost died," Alessandro said one evening 3 months after the trial, as they sat on the villa's terrace under a blanket of stars. "And the thing I regret most isn't that I would have left unfinished business, isn't that the family empire might have passed to Marco. It's that I was so focused on power, on control, on maintaining the family legacy that I forgot to actually live. I forgot what life was supposed to be about." "What is it supposed to be about?" Carla asked, pulling her shawl tighter against the cool October breeze. He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was soft. "This. Right here. Sitting with someone who knows the worst thing about you. That you were weak. That you were dying. That you were helpless. And still chooses to be here. Talking to someone who sees past the reputation, past what I do, past the name. Someone who saved my life not because of what I could give her, but because it was the right thing to do." He turned to look at her, and his expression made Carla's heart skip. "Someone who makes espresso at midnight feel like the best part of my day, who argues with me about medical ethics, who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm wrong, who laughs at my jokes even when they're terrible." Carla's breath caught. "Alessandro." "I'm falling in love with you, Carla," he said, the words tumbling out like he'd been holding them in for too long. "I've been falling for weeks now, maybe since the moment you knelt beside me on that bathroom floor and decided I was worth saving. Maybe later, when you risked your own safety to expose Marco. Maybe yesterday, when you explained the Krebs cycle to me like it was the most fascinating thing in the world and got so excited you spilled your coffee." He took a breath, and Carla could see vulnerability in his eyes, something she'd never seen before. "I'm falling in love with you, and I needed you to know. I needed to say it out loud before I lost my nerve, because you terrify me in the best possible way. You make me want to be better. You make me want to deserve you." Carla stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. This man who'd given her back her dreams, who'd believed in her when no one else did, who'd become her best friend and confidant, who looked at her like she was something precious and rare. "I'm scared," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Of what?" Alessandro asked gently. "Of losing this. Of ruining our friendship. Of the power imbalance. You're my sponsor, my employer in a way. Of what people will say. Of—" She paused, swallowing hard. "Of being happy. Of letting myself want this and then having it taken away." "Then let me be scared with you," Alessandro said, reaching out to take her hand. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, gentle and warm. "I'm terrified too. Terrified I'll mess this up. Terrified I'm not good enough for you. Terrified that you'll wake up one day and realize you could do so much better than a man like me." "You're not—" Carla started. "I'm not what people think I am, but I'm not innocent either," Alessandro said honestly. "I've made choices. I've done things I'm not proud of. I'm trying to be better, trying to change the family business, but I can't erase the past. And I need you to know that.
to understand what you'd be getting into. I know who you are, Carla said quietly. I'm not naive. I've heard the whispers, seen the guards, understand what kind of family this is, but I also know the man who brings me coffee at midnight, who asks about my mother back in Atlanta, who's terrified of ruining our friendship, who's trying to build something better. That's who I see. Alessandro looked at her with such intensity it made her shiver. I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm not asking you to commit to forever right now. I'm just asking for a chance. To see if what we have could be something more. To see where this goes. No pressure. No expectations. Just a chance. Carla thought about it. About the girl who'd been cleaning floors 8 months ago, invisible and forgotten, living in fear of deportation. About the woman she'd become, educated, sponsored, confident, with a future stretching out before her full of possibilities. About the man who'd looked at her and seen not a janitor, but a brilliant mind, not a charity case, but an equal, not a convenient story, but a real person worth investing in. Okay, she said, her voice stronger now, but we take it slow. Really, really slow. I want to finish my nursing program. I want to build my career on my own merit, establish myself professionally. I want to become someone on my own terms before I become someone's partner. Can you accept that? I can accept anything as long as it means I get to keep you in my life, Alessandro said. And if it doesn't work romantically, we stay friends, Carla finished. Always, no matter what. That's non-negotiable. Always. I promise. Alessandro lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Thank you for giving me a chance. For seeing me. For saving me in more ways than one. She squeezed his hand. Then let's try. Let's see what this could be. They sat there on the terrace for hours, hands linked, talking and laughing and planning, the Tuscan night wrapping around them like a promise. 4 years later, Dr. Carla Wilson De Luca stood in her pristine white coat at Florence's De Luca Memorial Hospital, training a new cohort of nurses in the toxicology department she'd built from the ground up. The department had become renowned throughout Italy and beyond, a center of excellence for treating poisonings and overdoses. 15 doctors missed the diagnosis that almost killed my husband, she told her students in fluent Italian, her accent now barely noticeable after years of immersion. Not because they weren't smart, not because they weren't well trained, but because they weren't looking at what they couldn't see. They were looking at the obvious, at the expected, at what their expensive equipment could measure. She walked between the rows of eager students, all of them hanging on her every word. Your job isn't just to treat illness. It's to notice what everyone else misses, to ask the questions no one else asks, to look at the patient, really look at them, and see not just symptoms but patterns, to see the invisible. One student, a young woman from Sicily, raised her hand. Dr. De Luca, how did you know to look for thallium when everyone else was looking at diseases? When all the other doctors had ruled out poisoning? Carla smiled, twisting the wedding ring on her finger, a simple platinum band engraved with their wedding date and the words Sempre Familia. Because I learned a long time ago that the most dangerous things often hide in plain sight. They look innocent. They look safe. A bottle of expensive brandy, a cup of tea, a supplement. The things we trust are often the things that can hurt us most. And I learned that sometimes the person everyone underestimates, the janitor, the immigrant, the woman without fancy credentials, is the one who sees the truth everyone else is missing. Also, Alessandro added, walking into the training room with 2 espressos in delicate cups. She's smarter than everyone else in any room she walks into, but she's too modest to say it herself. The students laughed, and several of them smiled at the well-known story of how the hospital's chief of toxicology had met her husband. After rounds, after the students had dispersed to their rotations, Alessandro and Carla walked through the hospital gardens hand in hand. It was late spring, and the roses were in full bloom, their fragrance heavy in the warm air. The Tuscan sun was warm on their faces, filtered through the ancient cypress trees that lined the paths. "Do you ever think about that night?" Alessandro asked, the question he asked her every few months, like a ritual. "When you found me on the bathroom floor, dying from poison, and decided to help." "Every single day," Carla said, the answer she always gave, because it was true. "How could I not? That night changed everything." "Me too." He stopped walking, turning to face her, his hands coming up to cup her face gently. "Best thing that ever happened to me. Almost dying brought me to you." "That's morbid," Carla said, but she was smiling. "But true. If Marco hadn't poisoned me, if I hadn't gotten sick, I never would have met you, never would have been kneeling on that bathroom floor at 3 a.m, never would have had the chance to fall in love with the brilliant, stubborn, impossible woman who saved my life." "You saved mine too," Carla said, looking up at him, at this man who'd given her back everything she'd lost and more. "You just don't realize it. You gave me back my purpose, my dreams, my career, myself. You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." She reached up, her hand covering his where it rested against her cheek. "We saved each other. That's what makes this work. It's not one-sided. It never was. We're partners. We're equals. We lift each other up." Alessandro kissed her then. Gentle and sweet and full of 4 years of love and partnership. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I have something to tell you," he said, and there was excitement in his voice. "What?" "The board approved your proposal, the free clinic in the poorest neighborhood, the one you've been fighting for, full funding, opening in 6 months. You'll be the medical director." Carla pulled back, her eyes wide. "Are you serious? They actually approved it? Every detail? The toxicology focus, the immigrant outreach, the translation services, the no questions asked policy for undocumented patients. All of it." Alessandro was grinning now. "You're going to change lives, Carla. The way you changed mine." Tears sprang to Carla's eyes. This had been her dream for 2 years, a clinic that would serve the people who fell through the cracks, who couldn't afford regular health care, who were afraid to seek help. People like she'd been once. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You wrote the proposal. You did the research. You made the case. I just voted yes along with everyone else." He kissed her forehead. "You did this. You're doing this. I'm just lucky enough to watch." And there, in the garden of the hospital where she now worked as one of Italy's leading toxicologists, where she saved lives every day using the knowledge she'd fought so hard to reclaim, Dr. Carla Wilson De Luca kissed her husband and thought about the invisible girl she used to be. The girl who'd cleaned floors at 3 a.m, the girl who'd been afraid and broke and desperate. The girl no one noticed. The girl who'd noticed everything and changed 2 lives forever. Because sometimes the person you don't see is the one who sees everything.
Sometimes the person with no power is the one who holds all the answers. Sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the one who saves the day. And sometimes a janitor with a nursing degree and a sharp mind can solve a mystery that stumps the best doctors in the world. All it takes is the courage to look where no one else is looking. All it takes is the compassion to help when you have every reason not to. All it takes is seeing the person, not the position. Never underestimate the person you don't see. Never dismiss the person society tells you doesn't matter, because they might be the one who saves you. They might be the one who changes everything. They might be the one who sees the truth everyone else is missing. And if you're that person, the one who's underestimated, overlooked, dismissed, remember that your perspective is valuable. Your knowledge matters. Your compassion can change lives. Never stop looking. Never stop questioning. Never stop caring. Never stop watching videos on this channel. Please subscribe. It means the world to us. You might just save someone's life.